Good afternoon, everybody. We are already at 2:31. Unfortunately, only 36 participants have joined so far,
Good afternoon,
although I
sir.
understand there are
Good
56
afternoon.
participants. Oh, don't switch on your mic just to say good afternoon. It is understood, my dear lady, all of us. So I say good afternoon on behalf of everyone to everyone else. And let us conserve the audio bandwidth. What I was commenting upon is that once again, unfortunately, this is the third occasion when we are meeting, and at 2:30, only 36 participants have logged in. I have not received any observation or complaint or mail from anyone that 2:30 is not convenient. It is unfortunate, therefore. I mean, imagine if you see the same, should I say, characteristic amongst your students, if they don't assemble in time for a class. I think what we expect from our students, we must ourselves practice. With that, in any case, this entire session is being recorded, and therefore it would be available subsequently to all viewers. But of course, it is extremely important that all of you should be able to listen and see, because these are the only occasions when we have a synchronous interaction with each other, which means that we must try to maximize its usage. So please check your connections and equipment. We have now 37 participants. Uh, Two participants have raised hand. Mrugendra has raised hand. Mrugendra, will you speak? All right. What I suggest is you may enter your comments on the chat session. Let us go ahead with this session. We are already delayed. I waited for 5 minutes, and the count of participants has increased phenomenally to 38 now. Very, very unfortunate. But we can't wait, so we'll proceed. I wanted to conduct a small poll at the beginning, but I'll wait for some more time till other colleagues join. Today, essentially, we do a review of the basic Python programming that we briefly saw yesterday, and we'll build upon it a bit more. Let me share my screen. So basically, this is part of a revision of the basic concepts of Python programming that we saw yesterday. We'll then move over to the code board to try and see some nuances in some greater details. To begin with, I had expected all of you to look at the relevant background material in topic one, which unfortunately many of you had not done so. So what we did is we actually played a complete session, a short session on Dumbo model of computing. Please understand the relevance. Dumbo in itself is not very important. You as teachers can construct other models. We have found it that the students relate to Dumbo very easily, can understand that Dumbo, in order to remember anything, has to put a value for which we have given the Mr. Dumbo drawers. Each drawer is identified by a label. As we'll see, we call them variables in our programs. But that label permits Dumbo to put a value inside that drawer or to copy a value from inside that drawer for any purposes. We then saw that Dumbo has some kind of a cart by which he can carry values from us to the drawers and from drawers to us. And this is essentially, we said, is equivalent of input and output operations. Dumbo can do also some computing. We saw that Dumbo has a set of registers on which he can do any computing. For that, Dumbo may be required to refer to values inside the drawers. For example, if we are adding two numbers, then a drawer named A will contain one value, drawer named B will contain one value, and our instruction to him will say something like C equal to A plus B, in which case Dumbo will have to take the value of A, bring it to the register, take the value from B, or look at the value from B, put it in the register, add those values, calculate the total, and put it back in C. This is generally the computing model of Dumbo. As I said, we have looked at the notion of memory in terms of the drawers of Mr. Dumbo, where reading and writing of values in memory occurs using our input and output mechanisms. This notion of input and output we had seen for Dumbo's model as a cart. However, we also look at a program. In fact, we looked at versions of a program yesterday where I tried to use the code board directly and share with you some simple programs. The intuitive idea of a program is simply that it is a series of instructions. These instructions given to either Dumbo or to computer are first read by the computer. Traditionally, this process of reading and understanding your instructions is called compilation or translation. For the case of Python, it is called interpretation. There is a technical difference between running C++ programs and running Python programs. C++ and other languages are first translated or compiled into a native language that the computer understands. Of course, this native language is the only thing that the computer understands. But what Python interpreter does is, it of course first reads the entire thing and finds out if there are any errors. But when it executes your program, it interprets every instruction. It does not keep the translation of the entire program within itself. It will interpret every instruction and execute it directly. And that's why it's called an interpreter. But we'll not go into the details of interpretation, compilation, etc., etc. Suffice it to say that there has to be a mechanism for us to write a program, which is a series of instructions, give it to computer somehow, and let computer execute. What we are going to do is, we are going to see a sample program and try to understand some nuances slightly more methodically today. In this session, we'll understand the structure of a simple Python program. We'll see some common features, we'll see significance of those features, and we'll look at that example program in some more details. As I said, subsequently, we will actually go to the code board and try to run that and other programs to understand some more nuances about Python programming. So let us start with a friendly Python program. Let us first read this part of the program. It says hash symbol file add underscore to underscore numbers dot py. Very cryptic, right? Well, actually, Python does not look at this line at all because it starts with hash sign. Any line in Python program which starts with a hash sign, as we shall formally see later, is called a comment. It is actually meant for human readers, and it is not at all interpreted or looked at by Python. Similarly, a blank line is seen here. It is also not read by Python. So you can see all the lines in the red which appear at the top are meaningful to us only, not meant for our computer. Look at the next two lines, which are comments, as I said. This program reads two integers and calculates the sum. Please note that such comments are very valuable for human readers, and you should never ever write any program in any programming language without including such comments. We shall comment more on this later. Now you have three lines which appear in blue here. Of course, on the interface, they will all appear in black because there is no color scheme there normally. The first line says print give two numbers. This is actually a command to Python. Later on, we'll see that this is in fact a print method. This is exactly equivalent to the output in which the Dumbo carries a cart and gives something to us as output. In this particular case, what Dumbo is expected to give is to print this string on our screen. Give two numbers. This is an instruction to Python to show this string to us. Print is the statement. The next two lines are commands to Python which invoke a method called input. These are actually functions. Well, I might say this at this juncture. Just like in mathematics, whenever you write a function, you have an opening bracket, some parameter, and then closing bracket. So between the opening and closing bracket, you write some parameters for that function. That is a mathematical notion. In terms of style of writing, exactly the same thing is used in most programming language. So in this case, for example, when I said print, I have a opening bracket and a closing bracket, and in between whatever I want to print is shown. In this case, it is a string. The next two statements, as I said, invoke input method. There is nothing written inside the parenthesis here. If you wish, you could have written a string which would have been displayed to us. But let us just look at this. It says A equal to this. By now, you have already seen yesterday that whenever I say A equal to something or B equal to something, what I mean is get some value from the right hand side and put it in the location for the variable A. In short, A is a variable name. Remember, it is exactly like a drawer that our Dumbo used with a label A. Here is another label B, which is being assigned a value through an input invocation. That means a value will be brought in from outside and will be assigned to the drawer called B or memory location for B. Observe that A and B are tags on equivalent to the tags on the drawer of the Dumbo, but in a programming language, they are called variables. We shall see something more about them later. Notice that C is another variable now. We are introducing C in order to hold the value of the total of A and B. How is the total calculated? You see the right hand side of this statement, which is another assignment string. Remember always, whenever a equal to symbol comes, it represents an assignment operation. An assignment operation means Dumbo either calculates something as given on the right hand side or takes input as given on the right hand side, calculates a single result in this case. In these two cases, it will get a single value from us anyway. And this single value in each case is put into the storage location or computer's memory assigned to the variable A, variable B, variable C. Once again, I repeat, A, B, and C are called variables in most programming languages, but we must understand that these are nothing but labels attached to the appropriate memory locations inside the computer, so that when the computer actually starts executing our program, it knows where to put the input value, it knows where to put the second input value, it knows that after calculating A plus B, where to put the result, etc. This is important because we cannot get the result out of the computer unless we ask it to get us a value from a location. And that location has to be identified by a tag. Observe the next statement. Print sum is, comma, C. This time I am invoking the print method or print function of Python using two parameters. The first parameter is a string which says sum is. And the second parameter is a variable name. We expect Python to show us or print the variable name here. This then is the structure of a simple Python program. In general, any program that we write is a sequence of what we call directives, declarations, and instructions. Please remember that computer languages, like our native languages, also have grammars. So you have to follow what we call syntax rules. Observe what will happen if we make spelling mistakes in our ordinary writing. Well, people will have difficulty in understanding. A computer is actually a Dumbo, so computer won't understand if we make mistakes. The program itself, all these lines, are to be stored in one or more files. In this particular case, I have stored this program in a file called add underscore to underscore numbers.py. Why I am doing this? A complicated way of writing this. Please note that this is called a file name. And like a variable name, a file name cannot have blanks in between. Name has to be contiguous name, like Deepak. Of course, if you write Deepak Phatak, you will say Deepak blank Phatak. But if you have to use a variable name called Deepak Phatak, you'll have to say Deepak underscore Phatak or simply Deepak Phatak in continuation. No blank is permitted in a name for a variable inside a computer. There are some special rules which you will learn automatically when you look at the corresponding Python tutorial available on the net. Let us look at this program a bit more carefully. I mentioned that the first lines are comment lines. Actually, the second line is not a comment line, it's just a blank line. It is equivalent in the sense that it is also ignored by Python. Python does not look at lines starting with hash symbol or lines which are blank. So, as far as Python is concerned, these four lines are superfluous. Let us look at the next lines. All these lines are instructions lines. So these are actually instructions being given to Python. Python is required to carry out each instruction as it encounters a sentence, and it carries out these instructions exactly in the given sequence, no other way. So this is called the sequential execution of instructions, and all programs have sequence as a basic structure of controlling the flow of execution of the statements that we write or instructions that we give. These are therefore the instructions to Python. I mentioned about Python variables. I would request you to recall the drawers of Dumbo. Just as the Dumbo had drawers with labels tagged onto the drawers to represent variable, meaning a value that has to be put inside or can be copied or can be seen or can be changed. Variables in Python are basic computational objects. They are called variables simply because they may contain a different value at different times. If we input a value in a variable, whatever was the earlier value is destroyed, new value comes in. If we do some computation and assign a value to a variable, again that variable value changes. So that is why it is called variable. But please remember, variable for all practical purposes is nothing but a tag or a name given to a memory location which holds a value at any point in time, and the value that it will hold will be determined by the instructions that we give to the computer. As far as usage is concerned, each variable must have a valid name. I leave it for you to discover what are the valid names. We will have a quiz sometime where the validity of the names, you will have to check whether the name given is valid or not. It's a very simple set of rules and they are available. I will give you an indication of where to find such Python rules for not just for variable names, but for variety of things. There is actually a very simple online free tutorial which gives you all the syntax rules and examples of how to use any instruction which is available in Python. Please note that Python interpreter does not need any declaration of a variable. Whenever a variable is used in an instruction, for example, you say a equal to input, then the a automatically is recognized to be a variable, and Python, while first reading the program, will actually internally may assign a location for a. We don't have to worry about it, but no declaration is required. Is a very important difference between Python and most other languages. As I said, Python program can have comments which start with a special character, which is a hash symbol. Blank lines can be included, and instructions comprise of computation and assignment of result, invoking input methods to collect input value and assign to a variable, and invoking an output method to display or print messages in value. Well, there are many other types of instructions which we shall see later, particularly when we come to conditional and iterative execution of our statements that we give. But essentially, instructions are executed in the sequence in which they are given. The first instruction is executed first, and after the last instruction, the program is assumed to have ended. This luxury is not available in most other programming languages, where you have to actually identify the beginning of the program and end of the program by either special statements or special symbols. Those of you who wish to know the difference might see the background lectures that have been included for C++ introduction, and you will see how C++ programs appear slightly more complex because they have more rigorous rules of the program structuring, etc., etc., etc. Before ending this session, I would like to comment upon comments. First of all, comments are essential for good readability of program. Please understand that Python doesn't care about any of your comments. Python ignores all comments. But you write a program which I would like to read, I write a program which you would like to read, and for us human beings, the readability of any text is important. Comments improve the readability. They can appear anywhere in the program. They are completely ignored by the language processing compiler, or in this case, Python interpreter. It's a good programming practice. So, once again, I will emphasize, insert adequate comments throughout your code. In fact, it is not uncommon for us to tell the students to say, don't write your program instructions first. First, write comments and then insert program instructions corresponding to comments. That means construct your step-by-step procedure which you have thought of in your mind and write the description in comments. And in between these comments, then you may insert actual instructions for the program. This is also a very good way of composing programs, because once you have written the complete description of your idea, incidentally, such an idea of composing instructions for a computer to do some computational work is called algorithm. So you are writing your algorithm as a sequence of commands, which is perfectly fine. In summary, then, what we saw is structure of a simple Python program. We saw that there did not exist any compiler directives so far. We saw how comments are written. We understood that we can use variables, but they have to be properly named. We saw that we have to use input and output methods to get value from outside the computer inside, and to show the internal value of any location to outside. More importantly, we saw assignment statements. We note that there are other statements also. We shall see them as we progress. Any questions so far? I'm stopping to share this. Just a request and a recommendation. Just like we expect our students to have notebooks with them, when we attend such virtual sessions on the internet, it is recommended that our students should sit with a notebook. So I always carry a notebook, for example, so that any question that people raise, I can note it down and I can look at the answer. I can jot down the answer, etc., or I can jot down the points that are being made by someone who is speaking. As a part of pedagogy of online live sessions, for educational purposes, this is, I believe, an extremely important step. So I will stop sharing this screen here. I presume that at least some of you have noted some points here. If you have not, doesn't matter. The program that I talked about, we are going to look at in the, all right. So I now see there are 50 participants. All of you will remember that yesterday I had specifically suggested and shown you the code board as the interactive development environment, and I requested all of you to create an account on the code board and start using it, experimenting with it. So I request my colleague Sushan to kindly run a small poll. Sushan, can you run the poll, please?
Yes, sir. Launching now.
So this is the question. Have you created an account on CodeBoard? Yes or no? Very simple question. My dear colleagues, I would like to remind you that this is simply a factual statement. I mean, either you have an account or you don't have an account. I don't think you need to spend so many seconds in thinking about it. I mean, either you have created an account or you have not created an account. You could have created an account earlier or yesterday or today, it does not matter. But still, out of 52, I see only 42 people have responded. I believe that we have 6 or 8 of us participating in this session, so the count 53 may be perhaps not a proper representative. But even if I discount, say, 6 people from our team, we should still have 47 people, and I have only 43 responding. That means some people have not voted. Please note that we will know who has voted and who has not voted, or who in the poll, and therefore I would expect. All right, 47 of 51 have voted. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for participating in this poll, but no thanks for 22 friends of ours who have not created a CodeBoard account. I would like to remind all of you a very, very important thing. This workshop is not primarily about the interactive sessions which we have planned. I beg to remind all of you that this workshop, this pedagogy workshop, is essentially an online workshop where all of you are required to do online work. These interactive sessions are planned primarily to make this workshop a blended mode workshop so that you and we can interact, you can interact, and we all benefit as you have seen in the previous session. But it does not mean that you do not do the absolutely essential and necessary work related to the workshop which is required to be done online only. I'll once again remind you to please go back and read the course brochure. The course brochure says that this is a 5-day workshop, but it would be executed over 10 physical days. It has now been extended further, as Professor Supratik announced yesterday. And let us all thank Professor Supratik for taking the initiative to writing to the Kendriya Vidyalaya authorities to get permission to extend this and so on. But the key line which all of you appear to have missed is that this requires 40 hours of effort on behalf of every participant. Please keep a hand on your chest and ask yourself this question. Have you spent 20 hours so far on this course? How many of you have spent at least 10 more hours than the few hours that we have spent in interaction? That is very unfortunate and very unfair. So I have so many chat session observations. Unable to log in IMBX from Mandari Kevat to everyone. He is not able to log into IIT Bombay X, but we shall look at this problem later. And you should write to, actually you should write and correspond to the course team. So there is no question that has been raised. All right. So I will share the results with everybody. So all of you have seen these results, and I would particularly like to draw your attention to a fairly large number of no's. 48% of our participants have not yet created an account on CodeBoard. I would once again request you, please do that immediately tonight itself and start experimenting with the CodeBoard mechanism. We will do that now in the remaining 25 minutes to see some more aspects of Python programming. So let me stop the poll and let me share the screen again. This time, let me share the IDE. You have to have a login ID which permits you to have this, your name coming here when you sign in. So I have signed in as DB Phatak. I have a series of projects which I can create, as we saw yesterday. I have added to this a project called Add to Numbers. I can open that project directly in the IDE or Interactive Development Environment. When you open it, you don't see anything. You may get confused. Please note, as I said, there is a tree structure of various files. What you are brought into is called the root level. Under the root level, there are two branches. One is called codeboard.json. You may just look at it to see how funny it looks. So this doesn't tell us anything. Obviously, it is not a Python program as we understand it. But the attention should be focused on this particular branch called main.py. Main.py is the name that is given to the branch by IDE, which contains our program. Now look at this program. Of course, the size of the font is very small here. So I'm going to expand the size by pressing Ctrl+. Please let me know when you can read. First of all, please remember that this is nothing but the same program that we had seen earlier in the slides. There is only one line which is added here. The first line says main file of the Python program. This line by default gets included in every project that you create. So I have let it be. But the file which I created, which says file add underscore to underscore numbers dot py. Observe that this is the same name that I have given to the project add underscore to underscore numbers. It's supposed to add two numbers. Rest of the programs you have all just seen. There are two comments here which say this program reads two integers and calculates the sum. Then these are my instructions. First, there is a print instruction which says give two numbers. We expect the Python computer to show us this string. Then there are two input method invocations. Each one gets a value. First one put it in A, second one is supposed to put it in B. The third statement says add A plus B, calculate the result and put it in C. And the last instruction of our program says print sum is, this is a string because it is enclosed in double quotes, and this is followed by separated by a comma, a name of a variable C in this case. So it should be expected to print the value of C. Let us click on this tab called run. By the way, there are many tabs here. So you can add files to project. You can save any changes that you make. You can edit, undo or redo. Direct editing is possible here. So there are so many things which are possible. You can, for example, view the editor settings, but let's not go into that. Let's keep our attention focused on simply running this program. As I said, I click on this tab run, and you notice what appears in this window. Remember, yesterday I explained to you three separate window parts. There are many parts for this screen that you see, but the main parts that we are interested in, first is the part which contains our programs that is invoked by clicking on main.py. Below that, there is a large window which is called the output window. You can see this cursor here. Notice that it has started executing the program and it is showing this string, give two numbers. This string or sentence or something is exactly the sentence that we had written in the print statement. Now it is waiting for input from us. Please note the third segment of the screen which says input to your program, and it gives a helpful tip: press enter to send. That means after typing a value, I should press enter so that the value is sent there. Since two numbers have to be given, let me click on this window. This will take my cursor here, and now I can type a value. What you see on the top is nothing but my machine's memory, my own machine's memory. I have tried to give these different values at different times to different Python programs. So stupidly it is remembering and it's telling me you can pick up any one of the value without retyping. But you will not get any such thing. When you give an input, you have to give some value. So let me say I give a value 23. When I press enter, I hope that the value 23 has gone in. Now I type 56. Press enter. What is happening? Nothing is happening. Why nothing is happening? Let us once again. Oh, I have not said run. In between I was doing something. Let's say run. Oh, give two numbers. So now let me give two numbers. 34. I press return. You will notice that 34 has appeared here. We have not given any instruction to Python to show us this number. But this is a default action done by this IDE. Whenever we give in a value, it simply reproduces that value on the output screen. Let us give another number now. Let us give the number 78 and press enter. 78 is also reproduced, as I said. But what you are getting here is sum is 112. You will notice that you are getting a parenthesis on either side. The double quote is replaced by a single quote. Well, this is not exactly the output that we wanted, really. Did we? Let us try some fun. Let us try to change this statement as a separate statement. And let us say again here, print C. And let us run this again. It will ask us to give two numbers. Let me give 12 and 34. Funny. This time it is printing sum is as a text, simple text, no brackets around, no inverted comma. And then it is printing 46 as a value. I would like you to wonder why there is a change or a difference in the format in which these two items were printed, namely a string of words and a value, which are printed initially. When I combined both of them separated by a comma in a single invocation of print, it was printed differently. When I do it like this, it is printed different. Please think about it and consult the online tutorials to figure out why this happens. We will not worry too much about it, but let me worry about, or let me explain to you some other nuances that may happen in this particular program. Let me try to run it once again. This time, let me give values which are not integer value. Let me give a value, say 32.8, and the second value I give is 12.9. Let us see what it does. It seems to be calculating correctly. It has calculated 45.7, which is actually the sum of the two numbers which I gave. Apparently, Python is perfectly happy to take different types of numbers from us, add them, and give us the correct result. In actual practice, these numbers are different from the numbers that we gave earlier. The numbers which we gave earlier are called integer numbers. These are apparently fractional numbers. These incidentally are called float type of data in Python. Again, there are different types of values that can be put inside a variable name. We shall see how the different values are handled by Python and how we can instruct Python to handle different values. That is a part of a sort of self-assignment that you'll have to do. Let me introduce you now. So you have seen this? All right. I will introduce you to, I still have about 12 minutes. So I guess I will take you to a program which actually is not written as simply a sequence of instructions. Remember, I said there are occasions when sometimes we have to check for a condition and either execute one set of statements or execute another set of statements. But we don't want both sets of statements to be executed. Now, how can we tell Python to conditionally execute something? Well, there is a mechanism. Python permits us to define a condition. What is a condition? It is actually typically a comparison of two or more things. For example, is A greater than B is a comparison. Is C less than 0 means is C negative. That's a comparison. Each such comparison results in plain English, yes or no. Any comparison that you make based on the values that the associated variables have at that point in time, that condition may either be true or false. So the answer to that question, is this true, yes or no? Python is capable of making such judgment by evaluating conditions. More importantly, based on the result of that evaluation, it is capable of executing either one set of instructions or another set of instructions. This is called conditional execution of our instructions in a Python program. Yesterday, we had seen a case where I will again go back briefly to that particular program. The program was trying to solve a different problem. This program is trying to solve a problem of adding two numbers. Let us go to that program and see what that program does. See, it reminds me, because I might have made some changes while I was working on CodeBoard. So it reminds me, you currently have unsaved changes. Are you sure you want to leave this page? That means if I have made serious changes into this program and which I wanted to save, then I can actually save. In this particular case, I have separated out the print statement of the original program into two print commands or two invocations of the print method. Perhaps I should save this, no harm. So I will say, are you sure you want to leave this place? No, no, I'll say cancel. Then I will go to this project tab here. Please note an important tab inside this project tab called Save Changes. When I click on this, it will save all the changes which I have made and it will tell me that changes have been saved successfully. I can now get out of this project by just going back to my original main page of my own, what should I say, room in the IDE. Now, I told you that we'll look at the so-called conditional execution of the programs. Let us look at program 2A. Let me open it in IDE directly. This is a program like what we have seen. It says age equal to input, give your age. Please note the way the input method is being invoked here. Instead of printing this text through a separate print instruction, we are actually including it as a parameter in the input statement itself. This is perfectly valid. Just to remind you how what it does, you say run. It says give your age. I give my age as 73. Press enter, and it prints this. Your age is comma age. Observe that by not putting parenthesis around this print variation, which is actually having these two elements, it prints all of this in a single line here. There is a difference in the way the print operation is invoked in different versions of Python. I'm executing these programs now using the normal Python that is available there. There's something called Python 3, and in fact, you have a choice of using Python 3 as the interpreter. This version has slightly different rules. These idiosyncrasies always exist in all programming languages. Let's not bother about it. Just to say that what appears to be common sense appears to be done reasonably well by Python. That is good enough. Let us go to another program now. This was the program where I have to find, I will not open the ID, but I will open the project first, because I had written here the purpose of this program. Please note that this should actually appear as a comment in actual program also. The problem that this program is trying to solve is find the ticket cost for a child who is charged half rate. The language is Python, etc. I open this, I go to main.py, and I get this. This illustrates the use of a new instruction type called if. Please note, the first one collects as input the base ticket rate. It is being stored in a variable called BR, arbitrary choice. Then it prints a sentence, what is your age? Now I collect age as input. This is the peculiar thing. This is not the sequential execution. There is an if statement which says if age less than 12, colon. Observe the syntax or grammar of writing this if. The keyword if is there. Then inside the parenthesis, there is a comparison. Remember, I told you that it is a comparison which results in a condition which is either true or not true. So either the age is less than 12 or it is not less than 12. These are the only two possible outcomes of this comparison. Please note that the age has been collected as input. Depending upon whatever is the value while executing the program, Python will check if age is less than 12. If it is, then it will execute the set of instructions which are written immediately after this colon below this, but with a difference, with an indentation. I could write many such lines below this. All of these lines will be executed if this condition is true. If the condition is not true, it will go to the next instruction. If the condition is true, it will execute all these statements and then go to the next instruction. So this is a peculiar way in which the if works. A condition is checked. If the condition is true, certain statements or instructions are executed, and then I go to the next instruction. If this condition is not true, I'll simply go to the next instruction. Let's execute this quickly and see what it does. Say run. Give the base ticket rate. Let me give the base ticket rate, say Mumbai to Nasik, say 100 rupees. Now, what is your age? Let us say I'm a child of age 9. So I say my age is 9 and I press enter. Your ticket will cost rupees 50. Well, that is correct. 100 rupees was the original rate, and I should get a 50% exemption. But wait, does this program work? Let us run it again. If the person going is not a child, let me give the base ticket rate again as 100. What is your age? Now I put my age. Suppose I am the passenger. My age is 73. I say 73. And I get a very funny thing. Your ticket will cost rupees so and so, and then suddenly I have funny words like trace back, most recent. All of this are error messages given by Python. Python is trying to tell me that in line number 10 in your program, print something something comma charge. There is a name error. Name charge is not defined. Please note that the definition of the name charge would have come whenever it executed an instruction with the name charge. Please note that there is a charge defined here, but it was defined only if the age was less than 12. Otherwise, it has no value. And therefore, it cannot print this when the age is not less than 12. We had solved this problem by introducing another clause which is available in Python. Let us look at that code where we said we call it Python program 4a. Let's open that in IDE directly. Now here what we have done is we have initially said charge equal to BR. This is an instruction which says, Mr. Computer, any passenger who comes in, ordinarily the charge will be the base rate. So you put the charge as base rate. If age is less than 12, then change this charge to base rate multiplied by 5. First it is asking me the base rate. So I type in 100. And now I tell my age as 73. And it says your ticket will cost rupees 100. So it has intelligent. Now it has not done anything intelligently, but we have intelligently introduced an instruction. There is another way of doing this. We'll see that and close this session. The other way of doing this is shown in program 4b. Let us try this. This is a variation of the if statement, which is very, very important. So please look at it critically. It collects the base ticket rate as input from me, as we did last time. Then it asks me, what is your age? It collects as input my age. But now the if instruction is given consisting of two parts. First, if age is less than 12, there is a colon here. Colon means whatever are the instructions below it to be carried out, to be executed, only if age is less than 12. There is a single instruction. Charge is equal to BR star 0.5. This means half of BR. Star stands for multiplication by. Now there is another statement, else colon. This else is an integral part of if. Else colon, under that we have written again with some indentation, charge equal to BR. I think if you read it logically, you will quickly understand if age less than 12, charge is equal to BR into 5.5. Otherwise, charge is equal to BR. But these are formal instructions being given. I could have written any number of instructions between if and else. They would all be executed if and only if age is less than 12. I could have similarly written any number of instructions after else colon. They would have all been executed if this condition was not true or false. So please note this else is intimately connected with the previous if that appears. How does Python distinguish between a block of statements that are part of if and a block of statements that are part of else? It distinguishes them only by the indentation that appears here. So for example, I may do variety of other things. For example, just to show you, Let me just arbitrarily say A equal to 999. And let me here say A equal to 111. Just arbitrary statement. Now, when I am saying print your ticket will cost rupees 100, let me introduce one more statement. Print A. And let us see what it does. I run it again. I wait for the result. I give the best ticket rate as 100 rupees. And I give my age as 10 years as a child. See what happens. It prints 10. Your ticket will cost rupees 50. And then it prints 999. I have asked it to print A. Where has it picked up the value 999 from? From this branch of if. Because this age was less than 12, so it executed all the instructions given after this colon, but before the else statement. And it recognizes this as a different line as a part of the if statement because of the indentation. Similarly, now let me run this by giving the best ticket rate again as 100. But this time I give my age, the true age, 73. So my age is 70. Your ticket will cost rupees 100 and it prints 111. What is this 111? It is printing the A value which was assigned in the else branch. To conclude, today we have understood how to execute or how to write instructions to Python such that the Python can execute those instructions conditionally. Ordinarily, Python will execute instructions one after another, but the if instruction permits us to write a condition which is checked by Python. If the condition is true, it executes one set of instructions. If the condition is not true, it executes another set of instructions. You can see that this helps us to solve a simple problem of calculating the bus ticket value for people with different ages when different rules apply. We'll see more such examples in the additional sessions that we'll include later. But let us close this session now. Let me stop sharing this. But we still have only 114 participants and it's already 3:32. I was worried that I have taken 2 extra minutes, which is not true. Which is not very relevant because I still don't have 190 participants joining us. So, Professor Supratik, what do you suggest we do till all the participants join? We have
almost half of them are not here.
Yes. So maybe we would like to spend some time in taking some questions from participants in between.
Yeah, maybe we will do that for 5-10 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
So 3:45, I think we should definitely start because otherwise we won't be able to complete.
I agree with you.
Okay, so maybe, so once again, welcome everybody. So since not everybody has joined, maybe we'll just try to take a few questions about what we did yesterday. So it would be a sort of interesting exercise if we did a poll on, so Sushant, if you could set up a poll on how many of you were able to go through the online teaching material at least partly, if not fully, since yesterday. I know that the mail went out a bit late in the evening, but I hope some of you had the opportunity to look at some of the material this morning. And if there are any specific questions about what we discussed yesterday, perhaps you can raise your hand and we can take a few questions in the next 5 or 10 minutes until we start. We are just the number of participants is 132, which is way short of the total number of registrants. Okay, so just to get you going, maybe so one of the things that we discussed yesterday was actually not just yesterday, the last few sessions is about making pre-recorded material short and also inserting some reflection spots or short questions which seek response from students. So it would be actually interesting to hear from all of you. I mean, just raise your hand if you have been following this, and I mean, even before participating in this course, and uh, if you have seen that this actually results in more students participating or more students sort of engaging in your lectures. So my question is that, or rather, not my question. It's just sort of to get the discussion going. This whole business of keeping videos short and inserting reflection points or activities. How many of you have actually tried this out? And uh, in even prior to attending this workshop, and if you could share your
Professor
experience.
Supratik, the poll is ready now, so you can
Okay.
request Sushant to start any time.
Okay, yeah, Sushant, please send the poll. Yeah, looks like most people have been able to view. Yeah, so there's a request to everybody to submit your response to the poll, because I just want to get a feel of how many of you have been able to see. There's still around 30 participants who haven't indicated their answer. Okay, so I guess, yeah, we have sort of stabilized at the percentage values. So around 85% of you have responded. So we have 115 responses so far, and
Professor Supratik, I'm still concerned
uh,
that we have 140 attendees. Even if you
yeah,
remove five, there are 135 participants who are actually physically participating in this interactive session. May I request everybody with folded hands that at least the polls you should respond. The question is yes or no. So there is absolutely, it's a factual statement that you have to make without any implication on the progress in your progress in the
yeah.
workshop. It's just a question that we are asking to find out whether how many have been able to see and not see. As simple as that. So I would expect 100% people to participate in the polls at least. Otherwise, what is the point in conducting such a synchronous interaction at all? Please, may I? We
Yeah,
can wait for just one more minute, Professor Pratik.
yeah, sure. No, I fully agree. I mean, it's hard for me to understand what stops you from giving a yes or no answer. I mean, either you have seen it or you have not seen it.
There is an interesting possibility, Professor Supratik. I hope it is not true, but this happened. I interviewed some students, incidentally, some
Mhm.
school students, to find out their reaction to the online classes.
Hmm.
But one thing that was observed by everybody is that the teacher cannot find out whether we are really attending or not, because the video was necessarily shut down because of the bandwidth problem. So
Hmm.
it is, in fact, one smart student said that, sir, it is not uncommon for some students to just log in and then disappear from the scene,
Correct.
because once you log in, your attendance is marked. I thought that was a very funny answer, but
Yeah.
by looking at what is happening here, I don't think that the answer was so funny. Anyway, but that's okay. For whatever reason, we'll assume that only 130 odd people out of 141. Not bad. Actually, that has improved
Yeah,
slightly.
actually, some of us are course staff already.
Yeah.
So there is around 83% of you who have been able to view the background material on pedagogy, and around 18%, that's 23 of you, who have indicated that you haven't been able to see it. So, I mean, the exactly when you conduct a course for your students and you put up material, and when part of the class sees it and part of the class does not see it, the kind of problems that you face as a consequence, right? I mean, the part of the class that didn't see it won't be able to follow what you're trying to say, whereas the part of the class that saw it is probably feels that they are being slowed down, because because the instructor is having to go through things that are already there. And so it's probably a similar thing that's going to happen here, but nevertheless I'm going to take a very strict stance on it, and I'm going to presume that there are 23 of you who have said you have not been able to view the background material at all. So it will be your responsibility to go through the background material. I'm going to proceed with the remainder of it, and of course some of it you will probably be able to understand even without going through the background material earlier, but some of it you may have to go back and relook at it. So please, my sincere request is to have perhaps a notebook and pen ready with you, so that when we are trying to go through it, given the limited duration of this workshop, we have to sort of progress at a certain rate, and unless we have your cooperation in seeing the background material, it's impossible to progress at that rate. And the situation is very similar to when you teach in a class. So I will, for the 23 who have not seen, please take serious notes from this session, and then at the end of today's session, please spare time to go and look up the videos, because these are actually very, very important points and related to the methodologies, techniques that you can use for effective online teaching, and this is independent of which subject area you are teaching. So it applies to all the three groups that we have created. Once again, the specific examples that we will cover in this session will be related to programming, but I think the principles apply to all the sessions. Okay, so we will go ahead now and we'll start. So let me see if there was anybody else who had raised their hand.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah?
Sir, we are using Python 2 or Python 3 because due to this difference, our calculation becomes wrong when in first GA1. Because the division methodology in both the versions are different, and the use of print statement is also different in both the versions. And we are presently teaching Python 3. Because of that, one of the answer was we answered in floating point something number by point something, and the answer was actually an integer because of Python 2 influence. So what are we going to use in our assignments, whether it is Python 2 or Python 3?
So Firuza or Nagesh, do you know what is being used in the backend in the evaluation?
We can use both. I think, in fact, three we can use 3.
We can use 3 because it is being widely used by others as well then.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Because of that, one of the I've given in the exam.
In the graded assignment, you mean?
Yes, sir. In the graded assignment, one of the answer was wrong because I was using the calculation method of Python 3. In Python 3, two integer division always gives float.
So I face the same problem too.
Okay, no, good that you have flagged this. So if Python 3 is the version of choice for all of you who are in the Python group, I guess we can use Python 3.
CodeBoard supports only Python 2.
Yes, sir. Yes, the CodeBoard supports Python 2.
Okay. So let me not get into this
Pardon, sir.
issue right now.
Sir.
We will, yeah. So about this
Python 3.
Python.
CodeBoard also supports Python 3. I've tried that.
No. So what I'm saying is that
yes, sir.
So we will get back to you with an email about whether you are to use Python 2 or Python 3. Okay. Let us not spend time in this live interaction session on this. I mean, it's good that you pointed this out. We will discuss this at the back end, and we will, whatever the decision is, we will let you know ASAP. Okay. I think CodeBoard supports both Python 2 and Python 3. It is not the case that CodeBoard doesn't support Python 3. Maybe the configuration for CodeBoard
supports.
It is using
supports.
Python 3. Yeah. So we will just, so if Python 3 is the thing of choice, we can use Python 3. That's not an issue, but we will get back to you with an email clarifying this by the end of today sometime. All right. Priya Karunakaran, there is something you wanted to say, or you raised your hand?
Hello, sir. I'm Priya Karunakaran.
Yeah.
So this is regarding the assignment.
Yeah.
You had extended it till today, but I am still not able to see it, and I'm not sure I am in which group.
No, we had extended it to today in the sense that we had said the deadline was over, but there was an email that was sent out yesterday about those who missed the deadline, what exactly you're supposed to do, how to submit your assignment along with the email you have to send, along with the reason why you got delayed and all of that. So that email went out yesterday evening. So have you read
Okay.
it?
Yeah, I thought we have to submit the assignment and then send the email.
No,
Okay, after sending the email, then only we'll be able to see it. Is it like that?
No. Have you received the email that was sent?
I received the email.
Yeah. So in the email, it was clearly mentioned, no, what you had to do.
That means we have to reply.
So which group do you belong to?
That's what I'm not sure which group.
So have you filled the survey in which you had to select whether you? Okay, can you please post your username over here? So what did you select? Whether you are a teacher, two teachers?
I am a programmer.
C++ or Python?
Both.
You will be able to select only one option. So which one did you select?
I don't know. I don't remember, but I have taught C++.
Okay, can you just post your username on the chat session? We will check and let you know which group have you belong to.
Okay.
So what we will do is, we'll go ahead with today's session, because otherwise we will not be able to complete it. There's quite a bit of material to cover in today's session. These issues that are coming up, these are important issues. We understand that these will need to be resolved. The best way is perhaps, not to sort of use it during the live interaction here, unless we have time for such discussions, but to actually post on the discussion forum or just send a mail on the email address that has been indicated. Yesterday night, an email that was sent actually indicated the email address to which you should write back to. Okay.